As we heard earlier in the newscast, Richard Henry Bain was found guilty of second-degree murder in the election night shooting at the Metropolis in 2012. The jury deliberated for 11 days, and this highlights the difficulties juries face in coming to a unanimous decision in a case like this. Andrew Barbacki is a criminal lawyer. He's also a former Crown prosecutor. And welcome.
Thank you.
Obviously, we'll never know exactly what the jury was thinking and what went on during those 11 days. But a lot of people are saying that this verdict looks like they reached some kind of a compromise.
It does look that way. It could very well be that with that length of deliberations, there was some holdouts for the not criminally responsible verdict, and some perhaps who felt that it was planned and deliberate first-degree murder, and they might have reached just a compromise on second-degree murder.
It's a very difficult situation that these 12 men and women face, isn't it? I mean, they're dealing with an extremely complex case with a lot of shades of gray, and yet they're being told you have to decide this or this or this.
Right, and it's very stressful. They're dealing with lawyers who are very persuasive, who put to them opposite results, and they have to agonize over coming to a conclusion that is good for society and good for their own conscience. And it's not easy with talented lawyers each telling you the opposite is what you should decide.
It's also very difficult, I think, for the layman to listen to these so-called expert witnesses, right? Because during the course of the Bain trial, you had two psychiatrists offering very different versions of what might have happened.
In fact, the versions are close to opposite, and in some cases there's even more expert witnesses, but you have, again, two opposite points of view by highly educated, trained people who have testified previously, who know how to present their arguments, and who can be quite persuasive. So in my experience, having done quite a few jury trials, there's a big difference between just the look of the jury and their mannerisms when they start their deliberations and when they come out with the verdict. They're very stressed. It's really a difficult experience.
A lot of people, aside from what happened with the jury, a lot of people watch this whole sort of trial and getting to trial unfold. The shooting happened in 2012. We didn't get to trial until, 3-4 years after the fact. Did we learn anything from this? A lot of people said, it looks like a mockery of justice, that there's so many delays and so many games that can be played by participants.
Well, the system can be a little bit slow. I don't think there's much advantage for the individual who doesn't have bail, who's detained to really get delay. It counts towards his eventual sentence. Interestingly, though, there is a notion that justice should be somewhat swift, or at least not slow. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, the Supreme Court came down with new rules to try to expedite cases. We have the law was laid down in the early 80s when the charter first came in as to unreasonable delays, and now the Supreme Court decided that what they had said back then hasn't been working, and they laid down basically a whole new set of guidelines and rules. It'll be interesting to see how they play out over the next couple of years.
And I just want to ask you something. It's more of a philosophical question. I'm going to ask you to sum it all up in less than a minute. But the whole idea of a jury of your peers to decide what you've done, in an increasingly multicultural society, in an era where people are told to be objective when there is social media and different opinions floating around everywhere, is it becoming increasingly unrealistic, do you think, to find that 12 men and women who are the jury of your peers?
That's an interesting question, but I think given that we're multicultural, we share the same values. To be eligible for jury duty, you can't just be, I won't say fresh off the boat, perhaps that's politically incorrect, but you have to have some status here. But being exposed to all these out-of-court pronouncements and worrying about what will be said on social media and having heard a lot about the case, it's pretty much impossible now in a case that's publicized to find jurors who haven't heard about the case. It's a question of finding honest ones who will put aside their prejudices and listen to the lawyers and the experts.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
It's a pleasure.